a little sound check. Believe it's good. Um, Maybe we'll do an interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about spiritual exhaustion. What that is, where you are, who we are, what's up, Sarah, how you doing? Um, so I'm sitting here right now. It's fairly early in the day for me. Sipping my food drink. Um, and It's a moment of sharing, right? I try when I have moments of when I'm contemplating. I want, or I've been trying to um, turn those into moments of sharing, and hopefully someone else can find benefit. But uh, I feel like giving advice hasn't done me, uh, very well with people, but sharing experiences has never let me down. So that is what we're going to do today. And casual conversation is inescapable. It's also something that I've learned over the years. And you better get good at it. You better get really, really good at casual conversation. Um, and diplomacy and social networking. Why? Because the things that you go through, both internally and externally, sometimes for some people they can be very grandiose. They can be hard to identify in a sense where, well, how do I convey this into words that doesn't make me sound overly pretentious or, like out there. So, um, casual conversation about non-casual things is rather inescapable when you look at it that way. So, um, because we're on the quote unquote spiritual side of Twitter, I still call it Twitter. I don't like calling it X. Um, and I will be doing that for the remainder and the duration of this spaces. So you better prep for that too. But yeah, general idea is that um, most of the more grandiose effects of your spiritual journey or awakening or whatever people want to call it, um, they're going to happen in very dramatic, grandiose ways, and they're going to sound rather ridiculous for the other person, regardless of their state of consciousness or level of consciousness or whatever. It's very difficult to put things into words, right? So usually people will fall back and default to just being silent, right? So if you're wondering, well, like why has this like spiritually inclined person who's had this or that experience or whatever, why they sometimes will choose to not talk about it at all? Um, that's the reason, because it's very difficult to how to say convey without you know it feeling it out of place. So what happens after you awaken to the idea of existing without your body, existing outside of your body? What happens when you awaken to the idea that, like all of the cliches, all of the tropes that you'll find, and I don't want to like underwhelm their effects. I don't want to necessarily degrade these findings, because as you're going through these truths, they seem very important. Um, when you understand oneness and when you sort of start to create some sort of image in your mind on the meaning of life and how energy works and this and that, um, you create this ideal in your head that you will always be under this um, effect, right? You'll always be under the spell of awe and this incredible emotion that comes with understanding totality and love and vibrating, or however people want to call it, especially younger people who have sort of like grasp the basic core of, well, spiritual truths and the esoteric study and so on and so forth. And the basic understanding of that is, I am so elated at all times. and this was me as well. And you find yourself just vibing with the whole world at all times, right? Um, but I'm here to tell you that this does not last. Not only does it not last forever, which it feels like it does, it feels like it would, but it doesn't last that long at all. Um, and I'll tell you exactly why. Um, the first stage of awakening is a sudden realization or a sudden understanding by a person, firstly, that you can go out, you are not your emotions, right? You can go out of your emotional experience and live less impulsively by, practicing some degree of control over your decision making and your sort of like emotional self. And the second realization of spiritual awakening is that um, everything is rather interconnected, right? And that you're here in this life as the primary source of causation for whatever happens to you, right? Like that's a very popular concept in especially in like the neo spiritual thought, right? That like, oh, whatever, I'm ultimately responsible for my life. It's all about like attracting and detracting. It's all about what um I sort of like put into the world and karma and blah blah blah. There's that. Then there's the stage of like removing negativity and negative influences and negative energies from your life, and you feel like your life is finally making sense, right? Like you've liberated yourself from the incredibly terrifying question of why why is this happening? And then at some point you arrive at the conclusion that, well, okay, like this all is happening in some sort of spiritual classroom where, these younger souls come to, uh, I don't know, let's say, advance themselves and become better versions of themselves. All of these are very, very cliche tropes of the spiritual path. And of course, there is truth to them, um, some to a lesser degrees, you know, than others. But um, it's very easy to maintain this momentum once it starts. It's very easy. It's not a challenge or not a real challenge, we could say, right? And at some point, once you feel like you've figured it all out, it just breaks down. And this is where the depression hits and the dark night of the soul can commence. So I'm just trying to explain to you, I'm trying to like foretell your future if you're young and on the spiritual path, right? That's your future. Inevitably. Well, because there's such a law called the law of balance, which does not work the way people say it does, by the way, but I'm still going to present it to you as such because you the young mind likes when things are deterministic and a part of some sort of grander logic. So the part of this grander logic, which is the lesser logic, let's say, it's that there's a law of balance, some sort of balancing effect, where it says if you feel incredibly elated right now, then that is a sure telltale sign that in the future you will inevitably feel not elated to a very similar degree. Again, this is not how it works. In from my experience, right? I'm not preaching here. I'm just saying from my experience this is not how it works. But again, because the young mind likes deterministic outcomes and likes to put things into logic, let's say this is how it works. Let's say self-inflicted karmic return is as simple as if you punch someone in the face, someone's going to punch you in the face somewhere in the future. Again, not how it works, but for the sake of referencing and creating some sort of example that's easier to understand. So what is spiritual awe, right? Spiritual awe is when you awaken to the idea of awakening. And that idea seems, again, I'm going to repeat this, when you awaken to the idea of awakening. So it's not that you've awakened, it's you've awakened to the possibility of at some point you experiencing this awakened state. and it's almost like giving you this fresh purpose in life, right? And it inspires you relentlessly to move forward. From my experience, and I literally see people going through this right now when they describe their experiences, and then they assign dramatic meaning to everything, right? Like every little thing. Like, oh, I saw 11:11 today, and it was a sign. You know what I mean? Like, so the depths at which they're experiencing these synchronicities, they assign incredibly great meaning to them. And my experience was very similar with this, where when you awaken to some irrationalities of life, and sort of like the illogical or paralogical or supernatural element, stricken with awe. A lot of other people who are often stricken with awe, and this largely works against your spiritual progress, is people who will access these ideas or these thoughts or these states of consciousness through drugs or LSD or so on and so forth, like or like sexual relation and some sort of experience, like almost like in a mechanical sense, right? They're stricken with awe because they are shown this concept as something that exists outside of them, right? They are shown these elemental forces, what I call, that exist outside of them, and they're stricken with awe. And it's all they can think about. It's all they can talk about. Have you ever met that person who tried LSD once and can literally not talk about anything else other than that one trip they had that they say that changed their life? Very similar to this. Um, Discovering new formulaic sciences like astrology, numerology, physiognomy, being obsessively, again, stricken with awe at the efficacy of these formulaic arts. Um, if you're looking for a portal or a sort of like a window into real spiritual progress, you must understand. And I know this is difficult coming from a point of elation when someone is telling you to calm down, when in truth, like, you're just on fire, right? It's very important not to burn yourself out, which you will, inevitably you will, as most of these other people will lose interest. They will lose interest. It could take a year, it could take 5 years, it could take 10, but eventually they will fall into that deep dark hole of depression. Real depression, not what they think or feel is depression, but real depression, which is lack of meaning and purpose, a nihilistic, hedonistic, survivalist experience of life. And it's very important to understand why this happens. Um, the moment you feel like you figured life out, the m- and again, I will repeat, the experience for me was the same. It was very similar to the experiences of some of the younger people I see who are sharing these sort of like messages, and they're very, very, like, confident, and it's almost like it's oozing and seeping out their awe-stricken state, right? um for me it was the same. I remember being so incredibly elated. I remember my aura just consuming everything with love and positivity and so on and so forth. This will not last. This will disappear. This will be taken from you. It's like when you're learning to ride a bicycle. um you know First you start with the simple acts, so to speak, right? You're on a three-wheeler, um and the first time you remove the extra wheels and you actually ride the bicycle properly, it feels incredible. It feels amazing riding that bicycle. You feel like you can conquer the world. All you want to do is ride the goddamn bicycle, right? um Over time, that that fiery elated effect, that emotion is going to, that inner fire, it's going to exhaust itself. And this is where most people find themselves having some sort of spiritual crisis. And because so many people are stepping into spirituality with all the wrong influences and all the wrong, how to say, mm, Yeah, let's say like, from a starting point of power and influence slash wealth, and what can this do the what can this do for me type of attitude, right? They're going to eventually find themselves in that spot, and that spot is going to to crush them a little bit. Why I'm telling you this, like why am I telling you this? Like I'm not programming you to be crushed by your own spiritual ambitions in the future. Why I'm telling you this is because it's important to know that this sort of thing is inevitably going to happen, and you can be prepared for it in a graceful way, right? Not preparing for it in a sense where, oh, I'm so afraid of losing this incredible, just boom effect that I have on the world right now. But this isn't yours, is what I'm trying to say. Like the momentary elation, the momentary state of mind, it's not yours. You've just inherited it from this new incredible realization that you've had about the world, and it will be challenged. It will be challenged by forces outside of you, meaning the external world. It will be challenged by others, so on and so forth. And this is usually where you know you plummet from the spiritual high to the spiritual low, and the spiritual low is um, an incredible desire to return to this point of elation. It's like a drug, right? An incredible innate desire. And then what happens usually with people, at least from my observation, is that they go external and they start blaming other people. And this is the phase where people start thinking, well, I probably have negative influences in my life, and I don't need this person and that person, and I'm gonna just shed everything. I'm gonna get rid of this and that. I'm gonna get rid of these people, and I'm going to remove them from my life because it's them that are taking away from this state of richness that I had and cannot attain any longer, right? Um, and this is a test, right? And most people who go through that test don't really realize that it's a test. They will again step into a state of ambitiousness and ego, and they will do so out of stubbornness, especially men. Women have this problem too, but you know, more uncommon in women. For men, it's like an ego thing. It turns into an ego thing. So even when you don't feel elated anymore, you still behave as if you are, right? And it's never natural, and So anyway, that is going to come. So at some point, you will realize that yes, everything is interconnected. Yes, you are in some sort of spiritual classroom or matrix or whatever you want to call it. Yes, spiritual awe is a thing. You're enamored by the idea of learning these new, and it's very edgy too. It feels like, oh, I'm learning all these secret ancient arts, and I'm so much better than everyone, and I know so much more than everyone else. Inevitably, you're going to feel empowered by these forces, right, and ideas. But the more you wisen up to it, and the more you realize the grander lesson of life and the grander meaning of life, you will inevitably want to use it less and less and less. You will be less enamored by these ideas and by these arts, and they will seem like child's play to you because the final understanding of the meaning of life, right, the final understanding of it, I'm not going to talk about that today, but a good prerequisite of that final understanding is that um you are here as the tempted, right, and your temptations are many, and those temptations serve you, and they serve you in regards to your spiritual progress, right? This doesn't mean that you live day to day, you know looking over your shoulder, right? Oh, how am I being tempted by this or that? Even that is a sign of spiritual awe. You understand what I'm saying? So spiritual awe is any radicalized idea or obsessive thought pattern. This leads to delusion and departure from reality, and departure from reality is something that is manufactured by the ego mind and feeds the ego mind. You don't want to look for insanity and irrationality. You want to look for sanity and rationality. And this doesn't necessarily go against the idea of spiritual growth. You can be a logical, rational person. You can be an objective scientist, an empirical minded, pragmatist. You can be those things. And you can also be a faith based spiritual person, right? Once you remove one thing from the equation, so once you're willing to believe anything, which is a primary symptom of spiritual awe, being you're so easy to convince, right? You're willing to believe that any little thing in your life is some sort of divine synchronicity or some sort of sign from the divine, so on and so forth. You don't realize, again, what we teach, that you live in a mirror world, right? So every symbolic, avatarized expression you see in your life, or occurrence, or event, or whatever, is interplay between the what do we call it, the dark feminine, because it is the dark unconscious. It is the unconscious parts of you that are sort of like hidden away, and the the higher masculine, which is the higher mind, the higher knowing, the higher self. The and both of these forces play into intuitive knowing. So it's just interplay between you as of your current awareness, which is the seed that must grow, right? The interplay between what you unconsciously uncover, what you unconsciously know, and what your higher destiny is, right? And the moment you forget that, the moment you forget the the increasing and rapid approach of death in the form of transmutation, the moment you forget it's about these things, and the moment you think it's about something else, when you sort of like playing the role in the grand theater of life, you that's how you know that you've lost the plot. Again, there's a lot of resistance people have to hearing this, and they'll usually, like, when they're not ready to really face themselves in this regard, they'll usually tell you something like, "Oh, you're just saying some random words and making it sound." No, I'm not saying any random words. I'm telling you something very simple. I'm telling you that the moment your spiritual awe is exhausted, your ego will take its place to um, preserve itself. That's the simple truth that I'm telling you. So at some point, you're enamored right now. You're amazed by it. Almost feels like it's this inexhaustible source of energy and knowledge, and you're in this incredible library of books, and you just like want to read them all until you die. But that's not the point of why you're here. You're not in the library to read every book. You're in the library to read your own book, to write your own book, and then to read your own book, to read back on your own book, right? Everything else is a reference or an example. So when people become consumed with knowledge, they lose the intuitive ability. They lose the ability to intuit which books they're meant to read in the library. When you lose that intuitive touch, so for example, the more you're stricken with spiritual awe, the less you are connected with your intuitive self, your intuition. Why? Because you're out of balance. You're absolutely out of balance. You are just incredibly elated. Your ego is also elated, right? And you feel like you have it under control, but you don't. But if you can't intuit the exact manuscripts you need to read in this library, you're going to take a very long time sifting through all of the pages. And most of the stuff you will read will confuse you even further. So, the ability to intuit is gifted to those who are no longer stricken with spiritual awe after they found a profound truth, profound spiritual truth. Yes, you've gained the key of that everything is interconnected somehow on a basic level. Great. You will be granted more knowledge when first you can grasp this knowledge that you were given without falling into spiritual awe. Your higher self does not want you to be elated and to feel this incredible elevation effect when you do find out new spiritual truths, because the moment that occurs, it understands that it's moving you away from it itself. I mean, So this is why these barriers, so to speak, exist. The moment you are ready to have a new dosage of truth and proof administered to your soul, it will be done so. But only if you're able to meet it with a calm and graceful mind. If it's going to make you insane, and if it's going to radicalize you, um, you you're not intuitively, you will not receive it. But if you go out and, in a formulaic sense, just seek it out anyway and understand some mechanical lower part of how a higher truth works, well, firstly, you are destined to misinterpret it, and second, you are destined to use it as a tool for your lesser mind, your egoic mind to grow, and then you will not even be able to use it for spiritual growth and spiritual progress. You may use it for some other things, which you see a lot of people do, which is a again, something that will only deepen the depression when it comes. It will only deepen the hole when it comes, and it is destined to come. It is inevitable. Again, not because Uncle Jack says so, but again because there are laws in place. So when you feel incredibly elated right now, when you're lusting for power and wealth and blah 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 blah, it is only inevitable that eventually these fruits will sour. And when they do sour, you will find yourself on the other end of that stick. It's not a great experience. So this is why truth and wisdom requires you to be emotionally stable and emotionally balanced. Right? I'm not talking about balance in the state of like, oh, find your balance. Like this some guru sense. But I'm saying that if you cannot be emotionally graceful, right? You are probably not deemed ready or worthy to receive higher guidance. If you can receive higher guidance with grace, and you won't go insane, like, oh my God, I can't believe I had this vision. I had this vision that I saw. And I've never seen a vision again. And all I'm going to do is talk about this vision that I had and I experienced. You, that's how you disconnect yourself from ever truly receiving. Because what the higher mind sees there is like, wow, this is a receiver that is very volatile. This is a volatile receiver. We have to be really careful with what we give them, because if we give them too much, they're going to implode, and we're going to send them down the road of spiritual regression. We're going to send them down the path of where they find themselves stricken with this spiritual awe because their consciousness, their mind was not emotionally mature enough to weather the storm that is brought on by the truth and having been granted proof of that truth. So, while the higher mind wants you to advance, it also understand that there is a chaos, there is a sort of a void that exists around you, the void of insanity, the void of that is implicative of the rejection of the real, of the rejection of what exists, what the consensus reality is. So light and dark, for example, right? They are symbolic quantifiers, so to speak, right? So they belong to the same procession of energy. So they're like the same thing, like the masculine and feminine, the light and dark. They're not evil slash good in the sense that we're taught of like, oh, like the good always wins over you. They're not evil and good in that sense, right? They're just like the simplified versions of it, right? So even like, let's say, the checkerboard theme, right? Like white and black, that signifies the ups and downs, right? If you look at the frequency of the colors, and that is implicative of water. So, for example, when we say in an allegorical sense that Jesus Christ walked on water, what we truly mean is he walked the middle path. He walked the crossing or the middle path between the conscious and the unconscious mind in balance. That's what we mean. Um, walking on water is allegorical among many other, interpretations, but it's allegorical of him achieving a state of groundedness and grace and humbleness. So this is a spirit that cannot be moved by these incredible grandiose truths. Because why? Because they have the lens of the meaning of life. They have the context. They wield the context of the grander meaning of life. So yes, the checkerboard implies the waters of life, and water is memory in the subconscious, and the memory of the subconscious are integrated allegorically into the story of Jesus Christ, let's say. And the idea of walking on water is the idea of walking a very thin surface, the thin line. You have to be very, what does it imply about the person who is able to walk on water, right? It implies that they are so light, that they are so lighthearted, they are so soft, and they're very gentle in how they move, and they're very graceful in how they interpret life and the troubled waters of life, right? Because again, the primary, how to say, mm, the primary symbolic meaning of water, being depicted in sense of like black and white in checkered board style, right, is that these are not calm waters. Um, these are wrathful waters, right? And what do we know about water that is not calm? We know that it loses its ability to reflect. It loses its ability to function as a mirror. But when the waters are calm, right, when your mind and your spirit, you're at ease, you're not excited, you're not stimulated, overstimulated, the water turns into a mirror, and it gains the function and the secret function and the secret meaning of the mirror. So when the conscious mind is able to, let's say, walk on water and stare into that water and see a perfected reflection of the self, this is where those two forces become integrated again: the great unconscious, the great unknown, and the higher known. Those That's the exact moment where that happens. So you can imagine that this cannot occur if you're in this state of excitement, or what I call spiritual awe. This can only occur if you're in that silver line. And if you look at the world and the duality of the world, the hidden aspect or the secret meaning of the world's duality is that there is a third energetical charge. There is the top of the pyramid exists for a reason. And the top of the pyramid exists for a reason because the third energy that should not be possible in this world is happening at the exact interjection of the twin energies of the masculine and feminine. So the masculine and feminine, even if you look at human reproduction in sexual intercourse, right? The allegorical meaning behind that is when the masculine and the feminine come together, a third energy is formed. And this third energy primarily is a vortice based energy, meaning it is a portal. It is a portal through which new life can be created. So allegorically, what do we know about life, the allegorical truths of life? It's that when these two energies are brought together, creation follows. So you can meditate on the deeper meanings and implications of that, and obviously you will find some incredible grander truths. But again, do not allow yourself to be taken out of your graceful state. This is what the cross, to a degree, also signifies, right? You want to be in the perfect middle. You want to be there. The geometry of the pyramid signifies this truth, where all of the energetic and electromagnetic qualities of the pyramidal structure, they serve they serve to be balanced. You don't build a pyramid and off balance it. You build it in perfect symmetry. And you build it in perfect symmetry because you want its electromagnetic qualities to be in perfect balance on every angle with itself, so that they can eventually, in an etheric sense, travel up to the point where they all meet, right? So if you look at geometry and sacred geometry, if you look at the design of life and the design of this world, you will understand a very simple truth, that everything is a meeting of twin energies and then a reinterpretation of these twin, masculine and feminine energies, um, and the creation of a third, right? Again, what is quote unquote magic, right? It is the transmutative effect. It is the manipulation of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which again are also symbols of these two charges of life, light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. The interweaving of these two forces through numerous and highly sophisticated or simple, um, how to say, manners to create a third um, energy. Um, Now, back to the topic of spiritual awe, right? When you do find out something that blows your mind, the idea is not for you to resist having your mind blown. The idea is to be able to have your mind blown and then settle in yourself again, right? To be able to take the truth. Because if you're able to take the truth, that is a telltale sign to the universe at large, or to the higher mind, that I'm ready to receive more. I'm ready to be given more intuitive input. I am ready. I have preparedness, right? I am not immature, and I'm not going to rage against the world now and exploit the knowledge or misuse the knowledge, or talk about the knowledge in a certain way, or try to do these. Everyone has that phase, right? Um, I started being interested in physiognomy for all the wrong reasons, right? And to this day, I'll have people, like, sort of like tempting me in a sense. Well, if you're so good at it, why don't you prove it? And I don't need to prove anything to anyone, because I honestly don't even feel the need to practice it as much. I really don't. I like the art. I respect what its functional uses, right? But I don't even want to practice it in a sense if it's not for a particular purpose. And the purpose is, like, sometimes you want to read someone to intuitively derive something from them, right? You want to help someone figure their life out in a sense. But if I were stricken with awe about it now, I would still be on the street today, like looking at people and making notes, as I did in the past, of like, oh, how they behaved, and if they had this feature or that feature, or blah blah blah. You will never get to the next level from that. Yes, you're going to be like this, in your mind, this like secretive, cool, edgy character that knows this and that and blah blah blah. Your spiritual progress will be halted. And even this, these grand theatrics of life, it's us lesser minded folk that need it, because we're like children. Like, we need the video game to read the contents of the book. We need the TV show, like the TV series, before we're handed the book, so to speak, right? We need to be invited into it through these, not lesser, but like more performative means. This is why parables, like the universe talks to you in parables in that sense, because um, your motivations are almost never right. They're all almost always wrong. It's either like survival or like this primal attitude towards life. It's either about dominating other humans and being better than them, or having your ego grow outside of yourself. Serving some grander purpose. It could be like a rebelliousness, or like this anti-establishment. It might have this anti-establishment quality to it. All of these things are stepping stones that lead you to real spiritual progress, and real spiritual progress takes no prisoners, right? um, After some point, at some point, you will have to meet the wall. And when you do meet the wall, uh, it's not going to be pretty because you will understand very quickly and very promptly and very briefly that you are not ready. You're not ready to meet the wall. You thought you had it under control. You thought you were just going to run through it, but you're not ready. I'll tell you why. Because the secret of spiritual progress, real spiritual progress, when you do get to the wall, and I mentioned this in the past a little bit too, is a sudden coming to awareness or a sudden coming into awareness of your own conscience. That's brutal. So you thought you had it under control. You thought you were doing a great job. You thought you were pursuing your own personal benefit or this and that. You cast words without thinking about them. Um, and then when you hit the wall, when you hit the gates of heaven, so to speak, in an almost ironic and paradoxical and humorous sense, if God's sitting there somewhere, right? If you want that basic, like very childlike description that a lot of people like when they want to offend God and their creator, right? If God is sitting there somewhere in the clouds and he turns a little lever, right? And the effects of having this lever turned is that your conscience suddenly activates. You're in for a very big test, and so am I. You're in for a very dark night of the soul, right? Because imagine the results of the sudden activation of conscience in a person who has been rather unaware of it, but they thought they were aware of it. They thought that they had it under control. They thought that their lives could sustain it and maintain it, but suddenly now you're drowning in your own BS. This is what you're being kept from. Like, this is what you're being saved from, right? When we're talking about spiritual progress and awe, this is what you're being protected from. Again, a lot of people like find this uncomfortable, and some people even find it scary, but you shouldn't, right? Again, you must have the grace and preparedness to understand that this is how it is. Eventually, you will be checked by your own conscience. And I'm receiving a phone call, so give me a minute. Sorry, everyone. Well, that's a first. All right, but I had to take that one. Look, we could finish it off with this. You want to be prepared for what life gives you in that sense, in a sense of sudden conscience. And you want to be prepared for it not because it's something you should fear, but you want to be prepared for it in a sense of now you know this is going to happen, right? To check yourself now. Check yourself now. Start thinking about it now, right? And most people won't because they can't. Like when they're in that elated state, they can't. So this is why I don't want to use the word hopeless, but it's senseless to go and talk to the person who is so highly elated right now with what they've achieved, and they have achieved it. It's true. Um, and you're someone who's telling them, "Hey, man, calm down," right? Don't feel so great. Don't feel so awe-stricken. Don't feel so elated. This goes against your progress. You're just going to default in this state for 10, 15, 20 years, maybe forever. Um, but yeah, when you do get to the wall, the idea of the wall is that your conscience suddenly activates and you become aware of your conscience and you understand the wrongful nature of almost everything you've done or said which you thought back then was okay, and suddenly you have a higher standard for yourself. I'll tell you why. Because the secret of spiritual progress is not only the effects of this sudden realization of conscience, but is also the idea of self-worthiness. So when you get to that state, this is why, and people again hate this, but this is why religious thought and religious tradition, for example, and spiritual tradition as a whole, regards the self as what? A sinful entity, a sinner. And people have aggression towards this. They're like, well, why I haven't done anything wrong? Why am I? Because it's a humble and gracious admittance of your own imperfect nature, of your inability to in the moment feel the full effects and the the influence of what you say and the influence of what you do. So you have to be graceful. Because the first realization that the wall gives you is that you are unaware of some of the damages that you might be causing. And you can be a well intentioned man or woman. You can be very well intentioned. But if you're blind to the idea that you could somehow in your inconsiderate self be harming the other more than actually doing good to the world, right? You will not be able to fathom and take that truth in the future when the wall is presented to you. And your ego will have to argue back. It will have to create these fragmented states of self where it says, well, I did this because of this. And then you're back to the blaming game. You're back to blaming the world for everything. Oh, the world is. So, this is why all the saints are riddled with doubts. This is why. This is where the self-doubt seeps in. This is when God comes to the saint or the to be saint, right? He's never the one who comes first. The first who comes knocking is everything that is against God. The first thing that comes knocking is, oh, you are so great and you did this and da 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 da, right? I forget who posted it in our Kaleidoscope group. The story of Saint Peter, and it was great. When an angel comes to him or something in the form of an angel and tells him that, oh, you're such a great saint, you've surpassed Moses and you've surpassed all of these people and we're ready to take you, right? um, and the saint understands his own sinfulness. How can he believe that I am greater than all of these other saints when I understand the inevitable sinfulness of my own being? I know that I don't know, and that is my proof, right? I know that I don't know the full effects of my actions. So how can I possibly not be sinful? So imperfection is the middle point that we talked about, the masculine and feminine, the symmetry, the meeting point. It is exactly this point of imperfection that we talk about. The meeting point of these two forces of creation. So hopefully that sort of like takes you away from the literal interpretations and the literal understanding of what it means to call oneself sinful, right? And to understand the allegorical meaning behind it, to really grasp the meaning behind it. It's not a concept that comes from establishment and government control. It is a sudden realization of a gracious truth that those who have gone to the wall, or what I call the wall, right? Those who have been to the wall, they understand and they want to save you the pain. But they also understand the senselessness of their mission. Because you have no ears to hear and no eyes to see, because you're so enamored by your initial spiritual pull, the spiritual progress. You're so enamored by it. You're in awe of it. So yeah, there you go. Okay, now someone's on my door, you guys. So I'll be right back again. This space is crazy interrupted. Give me a second. Yeah, okay. Take this as a sign that you can sort of like spend like 20, 25 seconds to meditate on what whatever wisdoms are being imparted. But today is a good day, by the way. Today is a good day. It's a very active sort of like dynamic thing, and it's showing as well. It's not a bad day for knowledge, but yeah, to go back to the point, understand that the master finds it senseless to talk to you about higher meanings and higher symbolisms, because the master understands that they've also been through it, and that you're not receptive. It's not that you're not unable to be receptive, but it's so highly unlikely that you would be receptive to ideas of graciousness and humbleness when you're again in awe and enamored with the idea of whatever spiritual progress you've created. So you have to, the master understands that you have to cross all of those points. You have to jump over all of those fences. You have to go through the pains and the disappointments and the heartbreaks and the elated states and the deep and dark um, holes of existence. So when you talk to someone and you know exactly where they are in terms of consciousness, you know exactly where they are in terms of spiritual progress. You can literally map their steps, right? You never want to tell them. You never want to make them aware. Firstly, because they will misinterpret it, and secondly, because they will hate you for it. They will despise you for it. They will say you have such a big ego that you think. So this is why it's senseless for the master to go in and talk to the novice or the journeyman, to talk to them about higher meanings and higher depths, not because they're talking from a point of superiority, but they're talking from a point of experience of like, I when I remember how stubborn I was when I was elated by the occult and the formulaic and the esoteric. I thought I was destined to find out all these secrets of life and influence others and rule the world and use it for my benefit. Who the hell would I listen to if some person was coming to me and telling me, you're eventually going to get tired of this, and when you do, I'll be right here with a pillow and a cup of tea, right? Like, it sounds ridiculous, right? But then you also realize that from the perspective of the spiritual master, it's so easy to foretell the future of someone. It's not that you're doing guesswork. It's that you're paying homage to their intellect. You're understanding that this is a highly intellectual person that's at this stage of their spiritual progress. And if they keep the same momentum and the same energy, they're surely to go to a very similar place, which we call the wall, to where I've been. And when they do hit that wall, and it's going to be very brutal, right? The more elation you have, the more brutal that's going to be. Do you think I'm going to talk today to you about what's beyond the wall? No, 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 no. Of course not. Because first we have to touch the wall, we have to understand that it's real. We have to understand why it was put there. And if you understand the wisdom behind I know that I don't know to its absolute depths, as I think you do now after this conversation, you will also understand that these barriers are self inflicted, they're self created, and they're created for the purpose of self preservation, of preserving your seed of life, which is your sanity. It is your sane mind. What is a sane mind? A sane mind is one that can have the understanding of its own existence and acceptance towards objective reality. When does the mind become insane? Very simple question, right? When it rejects the self, thus rejects the reality. This is when that mind can no longer be harvested into a higher state of being because it has deluded itself out of reality. So acceptance is key here. And again, there's also a symbolic understanding of why is it a wall? Why is it not a door? Why is it not a gateway? Why is it not a pillar? Why isn't it 17 kings with royal staves, like judging your. Why is it a goddamn wall? Because the wall has a very particular, specific lesson to teach you. You need to crash into something because you're going too fast. You're not seeing the peripheral. That's what the wall is teaching you. It's teaching you shut up, look behind you, and look at all the damage you have wrought. That's what the wall is teaching you. You're not supposed to be going forward. You're supposed to be looking upwards. So this trap that we talk about, right? And there are many traps. And again, there are many traps not because these traps are some malevolent thing, but they're all self-inflicted out of our own ignorance and incompetence. Again, like I always say, the fact that we cannot prove the existence of God, that we exist in a world where one cannot empirically prove the existence of God, is the proof of the existence of God. Because only in such a realm could the sentiment of faith exist. And what is faith? Faith is a lesson. Faith is a lesson. Are you willing to believe that a higher form of existence, a higher truth, a more graceful, gracious, humble world is possible or not without the proof? That is the test. That is the experiment of life. That is why all of these laws and mechanisms and layers and the astral layers and the physical and the elemental layers, the spiritual layers, this is why this grand theater was put into place. Because it's a self-examination, it's a self-reflection on the idea of what am I willing to believe? Who am I at my core? When no proof is provided, what do I choose? So it's a choosing ceremony. And what happens after the spiritual awe wears off, and again, it will wear off, just watch. You have a bunch of friends who are currently in a state of spiritual awe. Watch when it fades away, what happens. And be there for them as a supportive presence. Um, the after effect of what we just described, this process, right? The after effect of it is very hidden because again, they now have to upkeep and uphold this image of someone who's incredibly aligned and incredibly, like benevolent, right? But deep inside, the shadow work is happening, right? The doubt seeps in, the self hatred, right? You don't like who you are anymore. And then the moment the spiritual person starts fighting the outer, the external, that's the first sign. That's the first sign of them failing the task. So when it's about, oh, I have haters and enemies and these people are trying to take something from me, the matrix is coming after me and blah blah. This is the first sign that the person is unable to both accept and come into balance with their own conscience, like we said. And it's not a conscience that existed this whole time, but it is the sudden awareness, sudden coming into awareness of one's conscience. This is the second coming. That's what the second coming is. It's easy to run from your conscience when you don't understand the meaning of life and when you don't have the proof of God. But as soon as you have the proof of God, you understand that you are fully responsible for everything. And that's a very big weight to bear. And like I said, let's humor those who would degrade God, or let's say even the Christian God, who would degrade the Christian God to a form of a man sitting in the sky somewhere in the clouds. Let's put that beautiful, wonderful, gracious, paradoxical, ironic image in their head, and let's say if God is sitting in the clouds, that He is a secret lever, right, or a big red button, right? And if they press this big red button, higher conscience will activate in every single individuated human being at the same time. What do you think happens on earth, my dearest friends? What do you think happens? Because at the end, it's all about self-worthiness. If you judge yourself worthy of entering the gates of heaven, and every fool, including myself, every fool will tell you a story. They'll have a full list of why they should go. And then they'll also have a full list of why they should be forgiven for all of the misgivings that they've had. And they'll have a list of excuses for each and every one. And they'll have a list of people specifically or things, environmental happenings that they could blame as to why they did the things they knew deep down they were not supposed to do. It's children, right? It's kindergarten. This is what we are. We are all children. And then you'll have a list of, why I should go. But again, the master who knows that they don't know, this is the final realization of the master, right? They understand that when they have such high spiritual standards for the self, they might go to that wall, they might go to that place, and they might say, you know, I've decided that if I were to judge myself as someone who is worthy to go on the next level, right? I don't think I'm worthy. And this is the point each and every master spiritualist will arrive to. Eventually, if they're truly on the path of spiritual growth and progress, they will arrive to this state. And that is exactly what makes them worthy. You understand? Their genuine understanding that they are not worthy and at the mercy of higher beings and higher thought. They can't cross the wall. None of us can. We have to be flown over. And exactly that understanding, that humbleness, that graciousness, it's what makes them worthy. That is why the king who sits at the throne and wears the crown of divinity knows that they are not worthy of it. Because that is the only state of mind where they will further be inspired to achieve something greater beyond themselves, to become worthy of it. When you love your partner and your partner loves you, they you feel like, what did I do to deserve this? I don't deserve this person. I'm not worthy of this person. So you're inspired to godliness to become worthy of that person, and that person is inspired into godliness to become worthy of you. So it's a key, it's a mental state. You understand what I'm saying? It's a mental state that you're hunting. And that mental state is the genuine belief, right? The genuine knowing and the understanding that you're on the path perhaps to becoming worthy, but by no means can you achieve that fully because you have the graciousness and the humbleness to admit that you are unable to know the effects, the full extent of your own actions. All you can do in this life, in this world, all you can be is well intentioned. That's all you can do. Be well intentioned, accept whatever comes, right? And hope and hold faith. This terrifies people. It terrifies some people because they understand that I am no longer in control. And they want to be in control so bad that they're willing to depart from reality and create external enemies for them to blame things on to remain in the egoic state. This is all of us, by the way. This is not me talking down on people. This is literally me. This is me, right? And you and everyone else who is on this earth. We are all spoiled children. And all we've been tasked with is holding each other's hands and walking one another home, right? And we can't even do that. So this is all of us. This is the idea when let's say in the Christian faith and in some other religious ideas, we say you're naturally sinful. This is the allegory. This is what it means, right? This is what it means. Not to make you feel small or bad or not to make you feel like you're less and you can't be great and you have to remain small and remain meek or weak or whatever. You can still be strong-willed and determined. You can still live intensely with great moral virtue and value. You can still live in a sense where you allow no one to walk over you. This is a common sort of like illusion, this sort of like this mixture with these what I call like quote unquote hippie ideas, right? That let's say the spiritual man or the religious man cannot be intense and strong and righteous as long as they're well intentioned, truly and authentically, and they follow their intuition. This was never said anywhere. This was never said anywhere. But people love misinterpreting it for the sake of simplifying it so they can better argue against it. They don't really want to dive into the spiritual depths of the lesson. And again, I'll give you a glimpse of what's beyond that wall, and what's beyond that wall is again the parable and the example of Christ. And the example of Christ is, why do we turn the other cheek? Right? If you're sitting in a classroom, and I've sat in a classroom and I've asked the question, and sometimes even like the smallest, most nimble, right, person understands it. Mm. So when you ask the question, why do we turn the other cheek? Is it because we're weak? Is it because we're full of cowardice? Is it because this and this and that? We turn the other cheek because behind that wall is a realization that you can't really go beyond the wall because you are everything. So until everything and everyone is brought into a state of spiritual completion, the way forward doesn't exist. It can't exist possibly because humanity hasn't imagined it into being yet. Because humanity in its current fallen state, it cannot even hold the image of what a heaven would look like. You don't even know, like you can't even imagine what a heavenly state is. You have no idea. And people love to imagine the heavenly or blissful state as something that's very animalistic and primal. Oh, you'll have, it's like having 70 of the hottest women as your wives, or like, oh, you're gonna have this endless orgasmic. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't even imagine it and put it into imagery. Neither of us can. To a certain degree, we can, right? When you imagine the highest form of beauty you possibly can, you do access that portal a little bit, but Um, what you need to understand is that humanity has to form the image of what that is. Humanity has to form the image of the afterlife before it's able to get there. Just as humanity needs to be able to hold the image in their collective imagination, right? Of what lower states of being is, what hell is, so to speak. For example, right? So we define the limitations and the boundaries and the meanings of those things on our own. What is reality and law other than humanity's collective dream, humanity's collective imagination? That's where we are right now. That's why we turn the other cheek at the highest level of spiritual advancement. Not where we are, but the highest level of spiritual advancement is that whatever, like there is no self in the sense of self-interest. You understand? Because my self-interest as someone who knows that I am an immortal soul going through reincarnative cycles to eventually imagine the world, the next plane of existence that I want to go to, my self-interest is the collective interest. So my self-interest is that you are spiritually advanced. That's why we turn the other cheek, because again, my self-interest is for the collective to advance spiritually. I turn and look at the damage I have done. I turn away from the wall and I see humanity. Thoth describes in his Emerald Tablets, he describes his first experience awakening from the shadow realm of the unconscious, of impulsive living. He describes it as waking up in a room of slumbering flames. We've read that part. And he describes it very vividly. It terrified him when he first understood that all of these souls, all of the souls of humanity, everyone who he's ever known, were asleep. They were dormant. And he was in a dark room. And the more you wake up, right? It's like, again, like I always say, it's Neo waking up from the Matrix. He's in a pod and he steps out of the pod. And what's the first thing he sees? Everyone is asleep. So then inevitably your mission becomes to awaken as many as you can. So if someone violates you from that perspective, from that higher perspective, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm saying from that higher perspective, when someone violates you, they are in truth violating themselves, their own progress. And the moment you strike back, right, you lessen that progress. You further yourself, like personal self, but you lessen the progress. Again, this is why we say people love misinterpreting this and underestimating the depth and value and complexity. This is why we say that Jesus Christ, as a symbolic avatar of this spiritual knowledge, died for your sins. This is why we say it. Not because you owe Jesus a favor, not because you owe him some sort of debt, right? This is why we say it, because the master at its highest point of spiritual training understands that the symbolic act of living without self worth in this life is actually living in total self worth for the collective whole, for the collective spiritual advancement. But now imagine talking about this, now imagine saying this or telling this to a person who doesn't even know the wall exists. This is why there's such a huge disconnect between the spiritual teacher, right? Or those on the spiritual path, why they're quiet. I always wonder that. Because I know, like, even where I'm from, I know there's people living in the mountains who know all of this and more. I know them. I know them by rank. and reputation. And my question was, why are they so quiet? Why is it all so secretive? That's why, because it's senseless to talk about these things. It's senseless. It's been attempted before, right? It will be attempted again. The times and the pacing and the rhythm of the cosmos, the blood flow or the lifeblood must run. It must, like, all these events must take place because this grand theater of life is the and again, people hate hearing this too. These are the necessary, essential steps that are required according to our current collective level of understanding and knowing and consciousness for people to awaken to the simple idea of conscience and faith. Again, everything that's happening on this earth can only be happening the way it is. Everything that's happening on this planet, all of the suffering, all of the deaths, all this is happening because this is the only way and the most valid and efficient way at our current level of advancement in consciousness for humanity to learn its lessons, for humanity to be able to activate its compassion, its conscience, its intuitive elements, its dormant psychic abilities. It's needed. This pain is required. Pain is a teacher. So the answer to, well, why does God allow it? God allows you and you allow it because you can't learn otherwise. You're unable to learn otherwise until you've hit the wall, until you've tasted the brick and the dirt and experienced the pain of it on your own self. You're unable to learn otherwise that the highest spiritual value, the highest value of humanity is a singular, single human life. And the moment we remember that as a whole, as a collective, is the moment these things will all stop happening. But we've forgotten that. And we treat human life like a commodity. It's nothing. We've cheapened the human experience. We've cheapened the reincarnative pseudo cycle of God itself. We've cheapened it and turned it into nothing, turned it into slave labor, right? That's the issue. So, yes, accept that too. Accept that you are part of a collective who needs the death and suffering of many, many children to awaken to something as simple as the voice of their own conscience. To awaken to something as simple as righteousness and the pursuit of truth. Accept that. Can you accept it? I can accept it. And tell me if you don't feel like a piece of something. You know? Tell me that. Um, the final sort of like bottom line for this space, let's say, can be, among many other things, can be that what happens after your elation, your youth, your journeyman status, what happens is a gentle sadness. That's what happens. Because when the fierceness of the emotion fades away, and when you now have to settle into yourself and accept this new paradigm, this new reality, where you stop caring about being like, oh, hey, I have such a strong aura and people are attracted to me and I get all the girls in the world and blah, 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 blah. When you stop caring about that, and you will, I guarantee it because you're a human being, what takes its place is a gentle sadness for the world. That's what takes its place. unless you're driven into more egoic madness. But if you're not, if you're on the path of truth, what comes after is a gentle sadness. And you can see that even on like people's physiognomies. Like when you look at a person, when you see they've sort of like gone through that, you see it in their eyes. You see it in their eyes. It's unmistakable. It's like a sorrow for the world, right? It's like a song of sorrow for the world that the face naturally sings at all times. Firstly, you understand of just how greatly we have fallen. Secondly, you understand that there's so much suffering in the world. And thirdly, you understand that we are ourselves the architects of this suffering. All of this is rather unnecessary, is it? That's what comes. And with that gentle sadness comes a deep innate desire to just be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. Humbly, gracefully, just to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. To be well intentioned in your ideas and thoughts and words and actions. That's the most you can do for this world. If you are like me and you're just like an average person, right? Like, so that's the most you can do for this world. But if everyone did that, right? The little things, if everyone did the kind gesture, right? If everyone was well intentioned, the world would grow. We would see the world grow. You would see, and I would see your children and my children, we would see them grow into a better world, into a better state of being. But first, you have to go through the franchise, the theater, the movie, the TV series. It's very entertaining. You're going to be very sucked into it when you, especially when you're going through it. It's going to be very dramatic. All the flashy effects. You're going to see it for the first time. You're going to be ooh ah, right? A lot of those, a lot of those. But the moment you step out of the picture and out of the battlefield, you're like, yeah, I'm I'm tired now of being in this state of awe. I want to find meaning and balance. I want to go somewhere deep into nature, and I want to mm, really consider myself and my role in the world after I've had all the fun and after I've upgraded my aura 1,000 times and financially found success and gotten all the girl ladies that I want to, you understand what I mean, right? So think on that, my friends. Really, really think on that.